All right, business of Agile, better, faster, cheaper. We're going to do some administrative stuff real quick here and then jump right into it. This is who I am in a nutshell, I guess, or on a slide, as you could say. Contact stuff is there. Would love to hear from you after the talk, or during the talk, actually, if you'd like to discuss this further. There's a podcast out there that I do with a bunch of Agilists in the community. If you'd like to hear more about this topic and many others, it's out there, iTunes, Stitcher, and on the ryanripley.com site. And I'm really good at taking tests, a lot of badges up there. Always guess C, and you do very well on these. It's not too bad. You are at path 16, so this is the hashtag. If you're on Twitter and you want to tweet out, at Ryan Ripley said something crazy, hashtag it with path 16, and they'll appreciate that. It helps promote the conference, helps make sure that people get the word out about all the great things that COHAA and CareWorks Tech and Nationwide and all the great companies here that support this conference, and make sure the word gets out and helps them, so please do that. Roman voting, Roman rules. Who's familiar with this? Roman voting, thumbs up. You know what this means? Good. Thumb to the side, we're kind of neutral. Thumb down, kill the speaker. I hope we don't have any thumbs down. But at certain points, I might do a quick pulse check. Just thumbs up, we're good. Thumb to the side, I'll go deeper. Thumb down, I'll walk out the door. The retrospective prime directive. Basically, if we talk about an example, or if we interact, we're going to assume that everyone was doing the best they could at the time they did it. No judgment, just discussion. So we're creating a safe space on a college campus, so to say. Questions. So if you have a question, stop me and ask it. I'd rather get through all of your questions than plow through a bunch of slides. So if there's something that doesn't make sense, something you want to challenge, something you want to talk about quickly, go ahead and ask. I'm happy to take the questions, and in fact, I prefer it. If I have to talk through 75 slides, I'm going to fall asleep. So keep me awake, okay? So better, faster, cheaper. This topic infuriates me. And so being an Agilist, I had to talk about it, right? That's what we do. We get these topics that just drive us crazy. We dig into them, and then we try to figure out why they're bothering us. So better, faster, cheaper. How many of you have made a purchase or a decision because something was better, faster, or cheaper? How many of you flew in today or flew in for the conference? Anyone? Anyone buy a flight? What's your criteria for a flight, sir?
I can walk away from it.
You want a good outcome, right? Right, but typically when you're looking for flights, you're looking at how many connections, what's the cost, how quickly can I get there, can I leave at noon because I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. So you're doing all these, is it better, faster, or cheaper for me to do this over that, right? And that mindset, it's wired in us. We all want a deal, right? But how about when we're getting LASIK eye surgery? Do you want faster and cheaper? Does that make sense? How about your child's daycare? You're going to show up and try to use a coupon and get the best deal? Is that what we're doing? Or how about when surgeons are taking this kid out of your wife in an emergency C-section? Do you want to tell the doctor to go faster? He might look at you funny. You're not going to get it cheaper. I think that's established, but the doctor won't go faster. In those cases, we're after outcomes. And those optimizations, the better, faster, cheaper, do not matter, especially in this case. All I want is my son out as quickly as possible. And so these are kind of far out there. These are the tear-jerker, heartstring examples. But let's bring it back in a bit. GM went after better, faster, and cheaper with an ignition switch. Killed 100 people. So this ignition switch issue disabled airbags, disabled braking systems, cost the company, as you can see, $150 million just to deal with this initially, and billions of dollars in impact. Better, faster, cheaper. The Obamacare website. This is not a political discussion. We're not going to discuss the merits of the Affordable Care Act. What we're going to talk about quickly is the website. The website was intended to bring insurance coverage to those who didn't have it. Wonderful outcome. However, during this project, 250 million people tried to sign up the first day. 6 people were successful. Better, faster, cheaper. Almost $1 billion in tax dollars just to fix the bugs because they were trying to be faster and cheaper. Lowest bidder, willing to hit a fixed date as fast as possible, $1 billion in bugs later. So for some reason, better, faster, cheaper, and getting the deal is ingrained in our brain. It's what we're after, and we optimize for it, and disaster strikes. Volkswagen, this is one of the more recent. They wanted faster. Let's get the car out, let's cheat the emissions system, and we're going to lose $18.4 billion in the process. Better, faster, cheaper. Now keep in mind, for the consumer, we love the cars, and we want to buy the insurance, and we want to do all these things, but from the company perspective, they were optimizing on a different thing than delighting us. So I took this talk and this frustration to a coach camp. Anyone familiar with a coach camp? Hey, there's a coach camper. It's an open space, and so you propose a topic, typically 5 people show up, we talk about the issue and move on. However, this generated one of the biggest talks out in Washington, D.C. at the latest coach camp, and it kind of reinforced that this is a problem, this is an issue. We're seeing this kind of optimization from clients, from customers, and it resonated. So that's where it kind of started, but not really. I was actually having a discussion with my boss. So we were talking about Agile. Does everyone know who the boss is? Who's the boss? Anybody? It's Bruce Springsteen. Although, if you're an 80s kid like me, Tony Danza. But Bruce, for this talk, is the boss, because we don't want to actually implicate a boss, right? But Tony Danza, you're a close second, buddy. So we were talking through Agile. This is a common discussion. So we're talking through all the great things about Agile, what it does for a company. You know, it's organizational change, it's an impact, leadership change, teams change. Change. And we're going through all these things, and he's getting uncomfortable. He's getting nervous, just like every boss does. You know, Bruce doesn't like change. Talked about Scrum. Is everyone familiar with Scrum? Can you just tell me if you're not? So I'll do this quickly. We'll go ahead because there are going to be some references back later. Scrum is essentially a framework. And what it does, it basically says we're going to have a backlog that we're going to iterate on regularly. And we're going to meet daily to check the progress in our daily Scrum. We're going to develop our software like this. At the end of this 2, 3, 4 week cycle, however long the sprint is, we're going to review what we did with our stakeholders. We're going to use that information to optimize our backlog. We're going to retrospect about how we did the work that sprint, and then we're going to start again. Pretty simple in concept. We have some roles. So the development team, they take care of the how of the work. Scrum Master helps out with impediments and does some coaching. Stakeholders pay the bills and give feedback. Product owner keeps the stakeholder at bay, right? And they optimize the work that the development team does. So it's a good ecosystem of getting work completed. I even threw in the management slide. So this is the one that usually the managers get back on board and the boss is happy. Bruce is happy that he has a role. So we talk about how management has the ability to set boundaries, they set the rails, and they build stable teams and act transparently, and they figure out all the systems in place that's causing the work to not go well, and they do all these wonderful things. So management has a role. We even tried to cover that, and it wasn't enough. He stopped me, he put his hand up and said, whoa. I get all that, but how is Agile any better, faster, or cheaper than what we're doing today? And I paused. I had to pause because this isn't the first boss. Tony Danza asked me the same thing at another company. You know, the same thing Bruce is asking. And I think a lot of it, people in management, especially at a senior level, make the decision based on this. How is this any better, faster, or cheaper? But I think we just talked about how that's not the right optimization. And so what I'd like to do is try to reposition and reframe this a bit for us so that when our bosses bring this up, we can talk intelligently about better, faster, and cheaper, and how we want to make a shift. Now, I want to do a quick caveat. This is not an Agile versus waterfall discussion, okay? There may be a few comparisons, but this is apples and oranges. Both options are valid. Both options are good. If you want to tell me that you're going to build this using Agile, I want to see it, because I'm going to show up halfway in the project and tell you I want the upstairs bedroom and the downstairs. Tell me how you're going to do that. You're not. You want the plan up front. Waterfall works great here. Agile, not so much. So this is not a methodology war. It's not a battle like that. We're going to talk about a mindset that drives our decisions and how we decide what's important and what we optimize. And this is really the Agile sweet spot, right? So we're not talking about building houses. We're talking about complex things, just to be clear. Is everyone familiar with the Stacy diagram? It basically just shows us the stuff in the lower quadrant. They're complicated but known. So that's a good candidate for waterfall. The complex things, where things could change, more is unknown than is known. That's why we do Agile. That's why we take on the expense of the Agile ceremonies. Chaotic, leave that to the 2016 presidential election. Don't try to manage that. Leave it alone. So let's start with better. So we're going to go through better, faster, and cheaper. We're going to try to reframe these and rethink these. Better needs a goal. That's one of the biggest problems of better. What do you think of when better? What is better to you? Does anyone have, when you think of better, what would that be? Does anyone have anyone to throw out? What's better?
Less bugs.
Less bugs, good. More business value. Anyone else? Customer experience, happier people. We got a few more for better. Can't stand alone. That's right. It's always a comparison, right? And it always changes, but it starts with a goal. Good thing is, part of Agile is experimentation. We're always setting goals, and we're always trying to meet or violate that goal. We're learning. It's inherent in the Agile manifesto because we're uncovering better ways. It means we don't know the better way, right? Inherently, by accepting Agile, you're saying we don't know the better way, but we want to. That's also held up in the Scrum Guide by implicitly supporting empiricism, transparency, inspection, and adaptation. We don't know the best way. We admit that from step one, but we want to. And Scrum in and of itself is not a problem-solving framework. It's a problem-finding framework. It will show you exactly where your problems are. It will give you goals to work towards, but it won't solve them. You either decide to acknowledge the impediment or you don't, right? And then you have targets. So this slide, there's a lot of targets. The point is that we're constantly shooting at different things. We're running experiments constantly. Now, the guy that hit the top of the target at the opposite angle that they're shooting, I don't know what he was aiming at. I don't know what that target or goal was, but bless him for trying, I guess. But lots of targets, lots of goals, constant experimentation. This is what continuous improvement looks like. And eventually you hit the bullseye, but sometimes you're going to be, I don't even know what he was doing there. So essentially, the framing that I like is Agile enables better. It gives us the opportunity to try to be better. It gives us things to compare against. It gives us goals and targets. But better is tricky. It means different things to different people at different times. It's not a constant. Better is always changing. It's not going to be the same from market to market, day to day, situation to situation. And that's why we do experiment, and we change, and we adapt. How do we do that? So this is a squishy topic. We're going to get into metrics. This is the cockpit of I think it's actually a helicopter. Constant feedback, lots of metrics, lots of information coming back. Some would say too much if you don't know what you're doing with it. And that's the same way with Agile metrics. I want to start off at the very beginning. The second you embarrass someone with a metric, your metric program is over. And I'll repeat that. The second you embarrass someone with a metric, your metric program is over. So we're not using metrics to call out that Tom is the slowest developer on the team with the most bugs and all of that. We're doing it to find trends. And we're trying to generate insights off of those trends so that we can coach people to have the ability to be better. Does that make sense to everyone? And the data agrees. So if you look at, this was Scrum Alliance, this is their 2015 survey. Key challenge to Scrum adoption. We did not have clearly defined metrics to identify and measure success. 52% of all respondents said that was their biggest impediment. So 5 metrics to help you get through this. So I'm suggesting 5. I think you ought to come up with 5 of your own. But these 5 cover a spectrum, and they should not stand alone. All right? When you're presenting a metric, pick a couple out of each category. Show them together, show the trends, make sure you're not focusing on single point, single metric. That is meaningless. It's a single point in time. We're all about trends, remember? So throughput. This is a cumulative flow diagram. We familiar with these? Yay, nay? So what this basically shows, these are different statuses of work or different buckets that work's in. Some of it's in a backlog, some of it's in process, some of it's in test. What I like about this is that we can learn a lot from a very simple diagram by tracking a very simple metric. We're counting stories in the status that they're currently in. It doesn't get simpler than that. It's a very cheap metric that tells us a lot. It tells us our cycle time from dev to if you decide that QA or production is right, you can measure cycle time from there. It shows us bottlenecks in work, so when you see the clumping, look above, and perhaps something is going on in the test queue that we weren't aware of, we need to talk about. You can see where your WIP is. And in this case, there's a lot of work in process on that particular date. So it shows us a lot about the work we're doing. And we can use this to track trends. If you notice, this is over a long period of time. So we can see, has our WIP continually gone up? And our quality is now bottlenecking. There's probably something related there, right? And this also shows us that people do not fail, systems do. This is a hard lesson, especially for a traditional manager. But the systems of work, 99% of the time, will actually create the failure as opposed to a single person causing an issue. Now this continuous flow diagram and the cycle times and all these things, this is a callback to our commitment to continuous improvement. So this metric, or this set of metrics actually, it helps us see where the trends are. We measure our WIP, we see where quality is going. The trend is more important. We want to investigate bottlenecks, monitor cycle time. These are things that we can actually optimize, and we can do it positively. Defect density. So these are the number of bugs discovered during a sprint. It's our commitment to quality. So while our last metric was our commitment to continuous improvement, we now have a commitment to quality. Again, trend is more important than the individual data points. If you see bugs going up, check the WIP. So in this cumulative flow diagram, WIP was huge, testing was backing up, probably something related. Downward trends could point to improvements in practices. This is an insight that as a scrum master, a coach, a manager, you should take to the team and ask, hey, I see a trend, what do you think? And then work through that. Customer satisfaction, I think someone brought up a satisfied customer. I think that's a critical metric that is so difficult to define. So how happy is your customer? And it's really our commitment to alignment. We do things like Agile and Scrum. It's an alignment framework with our business. If you think through how the product owner is embedded with the team and a product owner optimizes the work that the Scrum team does. It's our commitment to alignment. Trends, again, are more important. Address the negative feedback quickly. Some kind of retrospective low-res means is very effective. But I find that not directly going for customer satisfaction could be an interesting way to get it. And what I mean by that is, let's optimize for alignment. So a typical road mapping session is a slide deck. And it's in 2015 we want to do this, in 16 we're going to do that, in 17 we'll do that, in 18 we're guessing, right? And it's a flat 2D kind of thing. It's not really alignment, it's IT discussing what they hope to get done. In this kind of mapping, and again, this is low res, guys. This is just, we're drawing this out. If you take a look, we've labeled, here's our markets, our business, features, architecture, events, and schedule. So we have important business units across the top, some features that they're expecting, some architecture events that are happening, a trade show that is just not missable. We have to hit this. And we have some scheduling items. You know, towards the end of the year, there's an important date. There's an IT freeze at the end of Q4. There's a budgeting discussion at the beginning of the next year. Lay it all out. This is what alignment looks like. And when you're having this discussion with your customer, suddenly they're delighted. Hey, look, IT understands that we have a trade show and they've aligned features and architecture events that are going to make sure that we hit it. This is transparency to the maximum within an organization. And I think optimizing for this helps you get away from trying to find a metric for customer satisfaction. If you focus on this, partner with your customer, and stay aligned, you'll tend to find their customer SAT scores go way up. And there's some agreement here from the data. As far as, again, Scrum Alliance asking issues with adoption of Scrum, senior management and sponsor support, clear business goals to be achieved, and alignment are the top three. So the data tends to show that the business wants alignment, and if you don't have that alignment, it will be an impediment to your practices. Team satisfaction. So this is a tricky metric. Again, this is one of those that I don't think you can optimize directly. I think you have to look at, this is one you take to the team, and you ask them what's important to you, and where do you find your satisfaction? Now, Daniel Pink wrote a great book, I think Drive with Autonomy, Mastery, and Purpose. That's a good framework, that's a good mindset to take into the discussion. Everyone's ripping off those ideas right now. But really ask the team. And I don't know what this always looks like, but at a recent gathering with my team, they showed up. We'll get to that in a second. So how happy is your team? Commitment to safety. So it's important that your team feels safe. And safe, not the job security, although that's important, but the safety to say something that's not popular. The safety to put their hand up and say, I don't understand this, and to ask for help, and to be vulnerable, to be courageous. That's the kind of safety that leads to the happiness we're after. Again, trends are more important. This is really important in retrospectives. Focus on these ideas in your retrospectives. Ask the team how they're doing. Is it safe to say you are unhappy? If the answer is no, this is an area you need to focus on. Now for me, I tend to check in with my team quite often. They showed up at a gathering with these. And these are cookies with my face on them. They are totally trolling me at this point, and it was hilarious. And I decided at that moment, at that event, I've got some pretty happy people who would actually go out and do something like this. So it was actually kind of a good moment for the whole team. If you're seeing stuff like this, you're probably on the right track, but still check in. Finally, the value delivered per sprint. So this is another squishy topic, right? What does value mean? Value is a different thing to everybody. Some have argued that value is just quality. I think that's a Jerry Weinberg quote that rings very true. The things that are of quality are the things we'll pay for, and so that means there's value to it. It's also a very logical approach. Ask your customers. Ask your product owner, what does value mean to you? And let's optimize to that. It's our commitment to delivery. At the end of the day, we're all delivering software. And if you're not delivering software, you're not doing your job. And so we have to have a commitment to that delivery mechanism. Again, the trends are more important. Can't stress that enough. Single data points are meaningless. Higher numbers are expected earlier in the project. We optimize our projects to high value early on. We want to deliver that sooner. We'll get to that in a second. A downward trend could be an indicator that it's time to kill the project. We've exhausted the value, and perhaps our resources are better used elsewhere. Now, the boss is not happy. He loves velocity. What about that metric? Everyone familiar with velocity? It's a capacity measurement, number of story points in a sprint. Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about faster. But the boss isn't happy. He wants to know that the velocity metric. He wants to compare velocity across teams. I don't use velocity anymore. I think throughput's better for the reasons we've already discussed. But everyone wants to be faster. It's like a race, right? Yes, sir?
Are you checking your throughput by number of stories or by points?
Number of stories completed. Yeah, points are, so there's a number of studies. There's a lot of really bright people, far smarter than me with the mathematics and the probabilities and all that behind it. What they found is whether you track story points or you track the number of stories, it all washes out. The trends and the lines they stay together. And so I think Troy Maginnis is one of the experts on this. You can find him on Twitter, and he has a great blog site. But he goes into great detail on the math behind it and why counting stories is just as effective. Neil Killick has a lot of good material out there on it as well. Thanks. So they called it a sprint, and that led to some running metaphors. Everyone wants to be fast. Well, if you ask Jeff Sutherland, if you look in his latest books, The sprint was really just supposed to be a focused burst of development activity. It wasn't supposed to necessarily mean fast, right? He just wanted focus. But everyone took the running metaphor a little too far. But the boss got excited. Apparently he's got a song about running, and he broke into a riff, and it was pretty exciting. But he got past the velocity issue. But it's not faster. And in fact, in many ways, it's slower. And this is shocking to some of our management. Here's an example why. These are 3 projects. The bottom is one massive initiative, right? So at the top, we had value until we didn't. So the value is green, the not value is red. We stopped early, we moved to the next project. And the pattern continued. We stopped early again, moved to the next project. So what we actually did across the bottom massive project or the top project, it's really the same amount of work. No one did anything faster, okay? The coders didn't start typing at 1,000 words a minute. They weren't pounding out code any faster than they normally do. We delivered value sooner, and that's a key difference. This project delivered at the end of whatever time duration you choose to put on this, while instead the other team delivered the most valuable things, moved on, delivered the most valuable things, moved on, and so we got value sooner, not faster. Is anyone irritated with that nuance? Some people hate that. They say, no, it's really faster. Are we okay with this? Okay. So the boss is a little sad. He wanted faster. I guess we were born to run. But we're getting value sooner, so that's definitely a lot of good things. We get a lot of other things sooner as well. So we get the value delivery, features, alignment, predictability. Risk goes down sooner. I mean, that's got to be a great thing for a project. Engagement, adaptability, and visibility. From a project perspective, all great things. From a learning perspective, continuous improvement, spikes, knowledge sharing, onboarding. Bringing an employee on in a highly collaborative, agile environment, in my experience, happens sooner than when they're not pair programming, mob programming, and working together constantly. From a feedback perspective, we get the fail fast, right time, right thing sooner, quality improvements, and trust. These are all great things that we get sooner by doing these projects in an agile way. And here's another crude drawing that kind of just illustrates some of these things in a little more visual of a way. And it's also the one time that we'll compare to waterfall, because I think it drives the point. So visibility. In a waterfall project, you start, you go away, you come back, right? In an agile project, you're coming back every 2 weeks, and you're showing what you have. And you're making sure that everything is very visible and transparent. Adaptability is a constant on an agile project. It gets lower across a waterfall project. Business value goes up and then peaks early, while in waterfall it takes till the end. And then risk. Risk is mitigated quickly because we're doing the most risky, most difficult things up front. But the development isn't faster, and that needs to be very clear. We're not typing faster. We're not doing more lines of code faster. And the reason is sprints are fixed length. Teams are of a fixed size. And so if you demand you go faster, you're just going to get crappy code. That's all that will come out of it. You're lowering your quality, and that's not faster. And here's another crude drawing that shows you why. We get to an end of a traditional project. We had everyone work faster. Faster typically means 60-hour weeks, right? Let's be honest, it's overtime. It's not sustainable. They've introduced a ton of technical debt to their project. Who's familiar with day 2, day 3, day 4 on a project, or phase 2, phase 3, phase 4? These are bug-catching phases. These are not value-adding phases to a project. Essentially, we shift the bug-catching to the next 6 months, and we pretend like that's good. It's like the Affordable Care Act website. We spend $1 billion after it launches to catch all the bugs. That's day 2, day 3, day 4. So we're not faster. And if we do try to go faster, we actually cost ourselves money, which means we're not cheaper. So from a cheaper perspective, this is, again, one of those fallacies that people get caught up on. No matter which methodology your team uses, you're going to spend the same amount of money to employ them. Their cost doesn't go down. And since they're not working faster, you can't fire half the team and get the same output, right? So this is a fixed cost. Comparing cost of output doesn't work either. And it doesn't work between projects because you're not certain if you got the right thing at the right time. So it does me no good if you built me a chair and I needed a couch, right? Even though it was cheaper. It didn't meet my need. Boss is not happy. You're not better, you're not faster, you're not cheaper. But we try to talk about simplicity. And so it's the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. This is one of our principles of the Agile Manifesto. This is what we're after. We're trying to maximize what we're not doing, and that's where lower cost comes from. So Nordstrom was able to do this. They were able to, they did an experiment. So these guys, they set up a development team right in the middle of a store, right on the floor. And what they're trying to do is sell sunglasses. So they did an iPad application that lets you take a picture of yourself, and then it shows you what the sunglasses look like because you can see the picture. Very simple. And they iterated on this over a week. And at the end of the week, they were able to come up with an application that the customers loved. Delighted the customers, sold more sunglasses. Big win in 1 week. So how do you do that? And it's story mapping. So they figured out through customer input what was most critical. And they validated that through cheap paper prototyping and eventually writing the app. And what they found out was they only needed 5 or 6 of those sticky notes, not the whole board. And so it turned into a very usable, very simple application that only took a week to do. And so it was cheaper because they left 20 sticky notes on the table and they didn't build things that weren't needed. So you get sooner and cheaper, right? But that's where it comes from. And it's predicated on and dependent upon customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So transparency is essential. That board was in the middle of a store, and every single customer could see that. So if I show up to buy sunglasses, I'm now a product owner. It was amazing. So I can go up and say, I don't think that feature is useful for me, but I think this would be cool, and I'll buy sunglasses if I can check this. Team is upfront about their limitations. They had a week, and they're sitting in the middle of a store. So they're going to be limited in what they can write, so they had to use paper prototyping to save time and to be more efficient and effective in the way that they were testing ideas. Stakeholders were open about their needs. We have a week's worth of money to spend on your salaries for this project, and we need a tool at the end of it that will help people buy sunglasses. And with all of those things in play, they're able to actually do one of the neater projects. There's a YouTube video that shows quite a bit more, but just the fact that they were able to pull it off is really neat. And again, the data supports this. The data basically says, that is there tension between Scrum teams and organizations? The answer is absolutely yes. And so through that kind of collaboration, we can break that down. It also comes down to, why are you changing the way you work? And so we went through visualizing goals, setting targets, measuring improvement, showing value. But it's an important question. Why are we working this way? Why are we developing this application? Why? And it gets you back on track. It sets those goals and targets for you. And so really the framing that I like to use now is really smarter, sooner, safer. So it's not smarter because our IQs all went up, right? I wish we could do that through Agile, but it's not always the case. It's smarter because we have inputs, we have metrics. We're testing things constantly. We're checking in, and we're adapting as we go. We're not just pretending that one metric today or one value today is going to be our same value tomorrow. We're sooner because we're doing the work that's needed, and we're cutting the rest ruthlessly and moving on. We're not doing those extra features, and we're not trying to push people to be faster and create all those bugs and do all that extra work. We're sooner because we release and move on. And we're safer because we're sustainable. We're not burning people out. We're giving people the authority to be courageous, to speak out, to tell truth about a project. And we're outcome focused. So in the stories we talked about at the beginning, They were all optimizing for cost, they're optimizing for date, they're optimizing for things that had nothing to do with delighting customers, right? They're not optimizing to make the experience amazing or to make people happy, they're optimizing for other factors. And the boss is happy, because that's what he's talking about. And I have absolutely blown through this talk. So that's where we're at. There's the contact, and I think we're going to get a lot of time back if we don't have a lot of questions. Yes, sir.
So, just to kind of step back for a second and talk about the framework.
Yeah.
When you're saying agile, are you talking or are you thinking about a specific mindset, the agile mindset, the agile manifesto, or the processes and practices?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I talk about Agile, I don't assign any practice or process. I'm only interested in the Agile manifesto. I think that's the purest definition. You start from there, but you adapt it. It is necessary but insufficient, right? The manifesto is our starting point. We inspect. You even inspect and adapt your own values and add, but the mindset I start with is just the manifesto. Anyone else? Oh, sorry.
And cheaper, you said I think you said it is cheaper in some ways, so I don't know if you can go back to that or just kind of
Yeah.
repeat that point again. I didn't catch all of it.
Cheaper. So Agile can be cheaper because we're not doing all the work that we initially thought we would. So let's compare to waterfall again real quick, although I promised I wouldn't. You get a massive requirement document. The expectation typically, in my experience, and you guys validate for me, is that we're going to finish that requirements document. Is that fair? Yes? So in an Agile project, we're checking in every 2 weeks. Is the bottom end of the backlog still important? Yes or no? If the answer is no, we start cutting. And it's cheaper because instead of spending 18 months on a project that really should have been 6, we're going to stop at 6 and move to the next thing, right? So that project in itself was cheaper. And then not even cheaper, but it's really just we're getting the value sooner. Because again, the cheaper is fixed. It's a fixed concept, right? The team's going to cost what it's going to cost over the course of a year. What you can maximize or optimize against is the amount of value that you get delivered. And by cutting short on a project and cutting features you don't need, you're able to get more value as opposed to one project where you're not sure. Does that make sense?
Move on to the next project and get more value on that project.
Absolutely. And that's facilitated by tight partnership with the product owner and by open and honest communication about the project. And just acknowledging that the 5 features that you absolutely love, the customer hates, and cutting them. And being ruthless about it and moving on. Good question. Anyone else? We've got time. Yes, sir.
So, I've got to go back to my boss, Tony Danza, and I want to say, I think we should be doing things this way.
Right.
Any tips on, aside from the entire presentation and getting him to sit down and watch it?
Right. Well, it won't take too long.
Well, helping to see the mindset of continuous improvement and experimentation over what we've done in the past has worked.
Sure. It has to start with, in my experience, an inciting incident. So if you're successful now, what the term the consultants use, if you're fat, happy, and dumb, why would you change? So if your practice is in place, if they're working, if you're profitable, well, what are you doing? So there has to be a hook, right? So whatever it is with your boss, there's probably an observation the two of you have made where something could change. And I think you start there. And I think you start with a few metrics that you can start, first of all, baselining it. And just say, hey, I'd like to do an experiment for 2 weeks and see if we can move the needle a bit. So I'm a fan of incrementalism. There's no need to just drop this in your boss's lap and say, this is what we're doing, knock everything off the shelves and go nuts. It's, let's just try this for 2 weeks. It's going to cost X, could bring us a value of Y. And if it doesn't work, we lost a couple weeks, but we learned something, and then we get the next experiment, right? And I find that that's most effective when you have a boss who's open to experimentation. But that's also the kicker. Are you allowed to try something and fail? And if the answer is no, well, then this won't work. There's another hand up. Oh, yes, sir.
Can you go back to your simplicity slide?
Simplicity.
Go a little deeper what you meant there.
Simplicity. Is this one? So this is a principle of the Agile Manifesto. And so we are after, it's really the art, let's just state it, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. And so what we're saying is when we have, let me get back to maximizing the work not done. I think this slide will help us, right? We want more red in our projects. And that doesn't sound intuitive, right? The green stuff is valuable. These are the stories, requirements, use cases, whatever you use that bring value to your organization. The red ones, we learned did not fall into that category. We decided that at the end of the project, the value those features brought was not worth the cost of delay of those valuable features in the next project. Everyone familiar with cost of delay? It's essentially what I just said, right? Those features were less valuable than delaying the next set of features, and so we moved on. So we want to maximize that. We want to get really good. In the writing world, they say killing your darlings. Up until Game of Thrones, it was unthinkable to kill the main character. You don't kill your darlings in a story. Well, George R.R. Martin kills them all, right? He's done with them. They have fulfilled their plot point. He moves on. And like a project, we got to where the value was at its sweet spot. The rest of the things were cute ideas, but they're less valuable than the items in the next project. We killed those darlings and we moved on. Probably not as brutally as Game of Thrones, but you have to be able to do that, and it's an art, and it's difficult because it can get very political, right? Someone has their favorite feature. This thing will be great, but the customers hate it. But it'll be great, and you still have to do it. Maximizing the ability to get away from that, you get more value sooner. Did I fix that? Cool. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
How do you kind of drive that home with, say, bosses management who are more waterfall-based and better, cheaper, faster? How do you negotiate or shift the paradigm to smarter, sooner, safer?
How do I change people? If you figure that out, call my wife. No. So what you're basically asking is, how do you tee this up with someone who is more traditional? How do you spin? I don't want to spin. I'm a little big to twirl, but I think you just have an honest conversation and you look at the last project and you say, this didn't go well. Or if it did, you're not going to have a case, right? But if you can think of a project and look at the outcomes objectively and see what you are maximizing and just ask for that experiment. I think that's the hook. There has to be an issue that you both observe. Or if you can draw a picture like this. Here's how our project went. And halfway through it, we started doing things that turned out to not be valuable. And I want to figure out how we can get those things that aren't valuable out of the equation. Bosses like that discussion, right? I want to maximize the value of the dollars you're spending so that you can send a status report back up the chain that you can tell your boss, hey, we saved the company money and we delivered value sooner. That's a very good conversation to have, right? And so I think it just starts with a real world example. I started this talk with a few heartstring examples, right? You don't negotiate the price of an emergency surgery. You just want the outcome. You don't tell the surgeon to go faster. But you move into real cases. The affordable healthcare site, Volkswagen, altering software to pass an emissions test, all of those different things. In your case, you got to find a project where you guys delivered something you shouldn't have. It was not the right thing, it was the wrong time, and it was of little value. And then try to figure out how you're not going to do that again by adopting this type of activity. And it's a series of conversations, right? This is not hey boss, I'm going to pop in for 15 minutes and change the way we fundamentally do work. You're not going to get there. But it's a series of conversations around these ideas and drawing them out, but also being respectful of, because I'm assuming the boss probably had, in my case, bosses in the past have had input into the PMO, and they've had input into the methodologies. And so you're calling their baby ugly, right? That's a difficult conversation. Have you ever called someone's baby ugly and had it go well? It just doesn't work, right? So but I think it's back to incrementalism. It's just, I made this observation. I think we could have delivered more value here. I'd like to try in the next project to do something a little different. And if that conversation is okay, I think you'll make progress. Does that help? Yeah? Not sure?
Well, I mean, it's still vague and elusive, but it gives a direction.
I can't give you step-by-steps specifically on how to alter the mindset of your boss. But what I can do is provide slides and provide these things for you to show him or her and to say, this might be better. And you got to go from there. But you can always tweet or email or say, hey, this happened, what do you think? And I will reply pretty quickly. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
So when I look at this picture, I like it because I like the whole model, right?
Sure.
The challenge ends up being at times, when I look at this, I look one project team, same flat cost, right?
Right.
Generally though, I'm gonna have two of those sections on the top. I still have the same flat cost on the bottom. How have you been effective in managing competing projects and agendas and backlogs, two separate product owners when you get a single project team?
Yeah, don't do multiple projects with a single project team. So the answer is don't do that. I actually, well, but it's also easy to debunk, right? I mean, a quick Google search on the impacts of multitasking shows you that you lose 50% of your value every time you ask the team to do something new. And that 50% cut gets very deep very quickly. I mean, that's the starting point of that conversation. It's, boss, we're having a single project team reporting to two bosses, right? Two product owners. They're context switching on two different projects, and we're losing half of their time just while they're trying to reset their mental space. Is that valuable? And I think the answer is no. And you get into cost of delay, because now instead of being able to develop and release good things on one project, they're now split between two, and the value will take longer to get out. I think there's positive points there that you can raise that at least the problem is prioritization, right? They don't want to, everything's a one, and they don't want to say that one VP's project is less important than another VP's project, typically. Exactly. So I think it starts with just data. Bring the metrics and say this is the value of this project and this body of work, and this is when we forecast the most valuable things will be done. And here's where we think the next one is. Tell us where we're wrong. And just let them see the data and decide. I think it's just it's a transparent conversation. I think too often we get afraid to show authority real numbers and just ask them to make a decision. It's not always going to be comfortable, but I think it's essential. Here is truth. Can I speak truth to you, and will you make a reasonable decision based on truth? Is typically how I approach that. Does that help? Thumbs up. Anyone else? Yes. And we'll come back.
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about probably more of a typical case than people like to admit, but you have a client who is in denial.
Okay, client's in denial.
Right. You can form your metrics, you can try to communicate clearly how things are just not quite as optimal as they could be or done as well as they could be.
All right, things are mediocre.
But by God, you know what? Even though we're failing constantly, we're doing everything right. You can't tell me any different.
Yeah.
I mean, this is. I don't think this is, far off.
No, so the roof's on fire, it's falling all around us, but everything's okay.
That's right.
Got it. So from an Agile coaching stance, I think you let them fail to the point to where they can't ignore it anymore. that's one approach. I'm a fan of Jerry Weinberg and his discussion on consulting. So we need 3 options, right? If you don't have 3 options, you don't understand the problem. And so the first one would be let them fail. The next one would be present them with data and let them do with it what they will. The third one to me would be walk. If the building's on fire, it's going to eventually burn you. And so it's one of those that if they simply will not acknowledge truth, and if they will not acknowledge data, I mean, you're stuck. It's a delusional, clinical type situation, right? So I think the best we can do, take these pictures and draw them out factually. Put some actual numbers on them and show them that their current behavior costs X number of dollars, and CC their bosses on it. And say, that's the ultimate lever, right? That's the, well, if this doesn't work, I'm looking for a new job lever, you know? And sometimes it comes to that. Now, if you do that and something bad happens, I'm not paying your mortgage. But, sometimes, especially in Agile environments, it's very scary because we have to tell the truth. And the truth is not always welcome. But as professionals, I think we're obligated to present truth and to sometimes face those consequences. Does that help? Okay. Yes, sir.
So,
I feel like a comic who kind of screwed up, right? This is kind of awkward. You blow through the slide deck, should have taken longer, and now I'm like, hey, where are you from? What do you do for a living? A lawyer, that's funny. But go ahead, sorry.
So business likes to focus on the performance of teams and whether this team is performing better than another team.
Yeah.
It seems like with this model, what it does is says that people and teams can produce a fixed amount of assets. So let's
That's
push
so
value
robotic.
up,
Yeah.
and then let's get rid of the features that really don't matter, and let's collect metrics. So instead of trying to optimize teams, we treat them as a fixed cost, and we optimize value output.
Always. If we're not talking about value, then what are we talking about? We're talking about some vanity metric that someone wants to shoot up the chain and show how great they are.
But
It's not valuable.
there is a problem when you get those features that come from certain individuals in your organization.
Yeah.
And it is their baby.
Yep.
And
Well, you said a lot of things here. So you started with comparing teams, which I think is a horrible practice. If you believe that people are fungible, right? Fungible is kind of a goofy word that we throw around sometimes. What it basically means is, are we all interchangeable? Are my skills equal to yours? Not at all. He has a far better grasp of timing and slides than I do. So we're not fungible, and every team's going to have a different composition, and we're all going to have different skills and insights and experiences that we bring to the forefront of our work. And so to compare a team, what takes me an hour might take you 30 minutes, and what might take a concept for you to understand or describe is going to be quicker or slower. There's so many differences that to compare a team on output to me is ridiculous. It's a meaningless metric that's used. It's basically carrot and stick, right? Or it's social pressure. Well, team A is working a lot better or faster or cheaper than you. Crack. You should be here more hours. And it's not a valuable metric. Now, what you can do is notice and observe that team A is doing a particular thing incredibly well. And it's a behavior that you want to see spread to another team. So have someone from team A work with team B for a sprint and lift and level them up. That's valid. That's just steel sharpening steel. Those are people lifting one another up. That's very positive. But to try to do a direct comparison of two teams composed of totally different people with totally different backgrounds, skills, and work. So if they're working on the exact same thing, that's waste. That should be in the red, right? Hey, we built 2 e-commerce websites. Aren't we awesome? No, that's stupid. So they're not doing the same work. So they have different domains, different complexity, different types of activities they're trying to perform. There's no comparison to be made, right? It's like saying why an apple is more amazing than an orange. Well, I don't know. I mean, they're 2 completely different things. But cross-pollinating behaviors, skills, observations, I think that's useful. The other thing you said was optimizing value. And again, that's all we're doing. Our job is to deliver value. That's why they pay us. We are supposed to, when we go to the workplace as professionals, bring more value or equal value than what they pay us. That's why they pay us to go to work, right? So if we're not constantly thinking about the value we bring, the value we deliver, why are you there? But that's not always so common sense, and that's not always the viewpoint. Is there anything else there?
Well, I was talking more about instead of trying to optimize the team, you try to optimize the value that the company wants to deliver and not make. So it's kind of like they're polar opposites.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have just said, I agree, and then moved on. Go ahead, sir.
You talked about looking at throughput instead
Yeah.
of velocity. Yeah, I tracked both as a Scrum Master, so I was tracking
Sure.
velocity and throughput at the same time. I report on both.
Yeah.
And I noticed that the throughput is actually it didn't take me very long to see that the throughput is very stable.
Yep.
Even when the points aren't.
Right.
What I've noticed on some teams in the past, I want to know what your view is on story points, because a lot of companies, I've worked at 2 companies before, and where they look at story points and velocity like very seriously. We'll talk about the management, and so they want them to hit their numbers.
Yep.
But what happens is the teams aren't stupid. These people solve problems for a living. They see this as a problem. They just game the numbers and add in a buffer, and so that they always hit the numbers, right? So
Well,
that's not even an accurate metric anymore.
Yeah, so the second you use a metric to embarrass people, your metric program is over, right? So as soon as you say your velocity is too low, why isn't it higher? Devs are very smart, and they will end your metric program. They'll say, hey guys and gals, we just went through this planning poker session. We think we're going to do 20 story points this session or this sprint. Let's just double it. And we won't tell the bosses. And now we've doubled our productivity and we're no longer too slow. Okay. I mean, that's why I don't like story points. The biggest case against story points, I believe Ron Jeffries tweeted out recently, I may be responsible for having invented story points long ago and I regret it, or something along those lines. So when one of those guys comes out and says, this was probably a bad idea, that's the first indication that perhaps there's something wrong. But in my case, and I think you've observed this too, counting stories is just cheaper, easier, and the teams seem to like it better too. They normalize around a story size. Eventually you'll start noticing they're slicing down to a certain size, and just it's through a natural process, it's emergent, that suddenly the stories are similar in size, and so counting just works. But great insights, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a comment on that. To me, story points or even estimations in hours, to me that's something that just the team should be concerned about.
Sure.
It should benefit the team and help them plan their sprints. And management to me, shouldn't need to be looking at that. They can't even compare one team's story points to another because it's estimated differently and they did size stories.
Yeah.
5 on one team is different than 5 on another. So to me, if you have management looking at story points or hours, then that's your problem.
Yeah, totally agree. You know, what are they optimizing? They're optimizing a capacity metric. Who cares? It's capacity. A story point basically says we can do this amount of work in this amount of time, but at some abstracted, goofy level that you really can't, you can never pin down. Because this is one of the hardest parts about training teams on Scrum is when you get to planning poker and they say, well, what's a story point? You start doing the consultant tap dance, and it's like, well, a story point is a measure of complexity versus duration versus, when you get into this thing, just count the stories and teach slicing, so vertical slicing. So the idea of the work not done, take it to a story level. We need this massive feature. Well, what's the valuable bit of the feature? Vertically down from UI down to database, right? Not just a horizontal slice, a vertical slice. You have this massive story, but what's the most valuable bit? And let's slice it from there and let's deliver that. Then we can go talk about story points over beers and laugh about how dumb they are. Because we delivered something. Holy cow, right? So good point. Definitely agree. This is estimation in general. So I'm on the extreme fringe of estimation. Like I don't see value. I see value in counting stories, measuring throughput, and forecasting off of that. I think if you're spending time doing work breakdown structures and, well, this team's going to spend 5 hours on this task, why? Build it. Build it, count the stories, forecast. And that's how we can maintain alignment with management. So we go back to the alignment slide. Well, we can forecast off of counting stories, right? So if we're doing 5 stories every 2 weeks, do the math, lay it on a calendar, and you can tell the business, we think right now this is what it looks like. We're going to update this alignment roadmap every 2 weeks, and we're going to talk to you about it. Isn't that better than sitting down and estimating everything to a minutia for some illusion of control? Great, this turned into a no estimates talk. Good.
That only works like if your stories are similarly sized.
I think you get there if right, correct. First of all, you're right. I don't think that's a problem, though. I think eventually, if you can keep a team together. So another problem. So the funny part about estimation is that the second you swap people in and out of a team, your estimate's worthless. You've just invalidated your estimate, right? And there's a few PMs in here going, no! But it's true. You have. You've totally wrecked it. And so if you're going to keep a team together, and if you're going to teach them to thinly slice a story, they're eventually going to start looking, what's the difference between a 1 and a 3? The consultant dance again, and well, it's a little bit bigger, right? But ultimately, the stories are going to be in similar size. And there's even really smart people like Bob Galen who says, I hand the teams a 1, a 3, and a 5. I don't even give them the bigger numbers because who could even know? And then eventually the size normalizes and you solve that issue. You're very right, though. They have to be same size. Go ahead.
Just as observation, I think the managers tend to look at this metrics because they don't talk to clients or professionals or understand that they're getting some values out of it.
So, yeah.
If the manager would sit down and say, you have, instead of counting all these metrics, you have something that the clients can use or you can.
If you would sit the manager down and help them with this, I think is a better way to frame it. So I'm in management. I'm an IT director. I'm not an Agile consultant. So I'm one of those weird people that actually has sympathy for management. So I have an incredible amount of pressure to be responsible for delivery, and that's an expectation. And so I'm very open to any idea that a team brings me that helps me with my pressure, right? And I'm also very open to sitting down with anyone who has a better idea than I do and figuring out how to report that differently. But the idea that if only management, back to Christopher Avery's talk yesterday, you're not empowered when you're in that mental state. If only management would do this, we'll give them a reason, right? That's back on us. As a leader, as an Agile coach, as a Scrum Master, as a director, I should be giving people a reason to think this is smart. I should be able to prove this. We're not working on hopes and dreams in an Agile space, right? I should be able to go. I'm not scolding you, sir. I'm just saying. I just went into dad mode for a minute. I'm like, no, it should be like this. But we should be able to prove this, and we prove it through experimentation. And sometimes we're wrong, and we admit it. We move on. Does that make sense? Good observation. If only management, but just switch it. Let's just help them.
Yeah, because the same thing happens with me with the story point when they
Yeah.
make estimates. Some of the developers, they know that the managers are just looking at estimates, so they'll just increase the estimate.
Yeah, they're smart.
How many hours they're working.
But they got punished, and the management violated the golden rule of metrics. Once you embarrass, abuse, hurt someone with a metric, it's over. And we're all like that. We'll move away from pain, right? You don't keep your hand on the stove because it feels good. You pull it away because you just gave yourself a 3rd-degree burn. Same thing with metrics. If someone's beating you over the head because your velocity is too low, you're going to find a way to game it up. Because like we talked about, you can't go faster, right? So even if you type faster, you work more hours, you got the keyboard smoking, at the end you've added so much technical debt, you will be slower later. And you will be cleaning up bugs later, which means you're doing rework, which means you're not delivering the next valuable story. You can't go faster. Okay? Anyone else? You guys have helped get us to an hour, so I appreciate that. Is there anything else I can answer or talk to or make up for you? Yes?
One more question.
Yeah.
It's a little specific, but the Scrum roles.
Yeah.
I have a team where, and this is a legacy situation since before they moved to Agile. Basically, we have a team that's very much research and development. So Agile is kind of good for them, right? But Scrum is good for them. However, what we have is a situation where our end users are other developers downstream from us. It's almost like a DevOps type of situation.
Right.
And so our product owner is actually our tech lead, who's
Ooh.
also partially our architect. So obviously
So you have a product owner who's a tech lead, who's an architect, and he's a weekend magician.
so he's a bottleneck. Although he worked very hard, he's one person.
Oh, don't call people bottlenecks. That's not nice.
I mean,
You're a bottleneck.
no,
What?
I mean, it's not that he's not. He's a very.
No, I got you. I'm just
Yeah,
teasing.
yeah. There's only so much time in a day.
Well, there's only so many roles you can fill too, and it sounds like they need to pick one and let this person do it well, instead of doing 3 roles poorly and having people call them a bottleneck. So this is a common impediment, right? So we're going to take our traditional organization, we're going to drop Scrum on top of it, and we're going to have, well, hey, a PM can be a developer, and sometimes they can be the architect, and that's just, it doesn't work. You're mixing a bad paradigm with a good one, and you get the same result. You're saying, we want to do Scrum, and we want to be Agile, but we're not going to change anything. And that...
Yeah, the management attitude is kind of like we can't get a product owner because they won't be technical enough because they're used for product owner coming from the business.
You don't need a technical product owner, though. Why would you? So this is fun. These kind of conversations go sideways quickly, but what's the value of a technical product owner? I want a product owner that understands the business. I want a product owner that understands the customers. I want a product owner who is ruthless in prioritization and decision making. I don't need a tech lead from a product owner. I've got a Scrum team of very talented people, right? I just need someone who understands the business, who can work with the development team to make sure we're developing the right thing at the right time. And because they own the how. Developers own the how. And so what is a tech lead going to do if they can't control the how? I mean, there's no role there. So, but that's hard. Go back to your office and make that bold proclamation and see how well you do. Again, I'm not paying your mortgage. But it's just one of those things where you're either going to do this or you're not. You're going to commit to it or you're not. And basically, it's a common pattern where they'll backslide back into old practices, and it'll start looking like the old world again. Yes, sir.
An observation there. It sounded like to me that his his team is developing out of the research and development, developing components, developing pieces that other development teams are going to use.
Correct.
Sure.
So his customer is the development team.
Great.
The developer. So the natural product owner, to me, the person who is the consumer of that are people on that technical team, right?
Sure.
So to me, the product owner isn't a business person; it's the IT person who's the consumer.
Are we still selling this stuff?
This isn't
Are we selling it? Is it for profit? Oh, that's like a consult. That's like a $200 an hour discussion. Okay, got it. Okay.
And we'll need much more alcohol.
The problem is like there's 6 different product teams that's team services, so
Yeah.
or now say 4.
Good. Well, good luck. I hope you guys find the right balance between technical and business then, because the PO isn't just the business conduit, the expert. I mean, they also have to be able to prioritize, to cut, to in some ways manage the work from an optimization standpoint. And what I mean by that is they have to be able to say what's valuable and get the team to have that vision of what's valuable and then to execute. And so it's not just tech chops that will get them through that. There's a lot of other skills that have to blend in. So if you have a tech lead that's also very good at the PO role, in your case, that could work. Anything else before we pretend like this went the right length and move on? No? All right, thank you.